Oh, I'm on. Hello, my name is Patterson, and I am your Lightning Talk host for today. I want to introduce the first two. Thank you. If you tweet with #GoGaruku, it'll show up on the sign, but we don't have much time, so I'm going to get into it here. Our first Lightning Talkers are scumbag Lightning Talkers. Have Kina give Lightning Talk. Go.
Seems good. Go.
Okay, so yesterday I made a proposal. By the way, you should stop making proposals because the last one I did I'm still paying for my marriage. But, anyway, I made a proposal about allowing underscore as a syntax for partial application, and basically how it would work. So I'm just going to review it very briefly. Thank you. The way it's going to work is that we can put underscore, and that it's going to return a lambda that we can then pass to each, and then it's going to print each element in the array. And the way basically we would be able to do stuff like that. So basically, puts underscore is returning a lambda, exactly the same thing, and this is exactly the same as this, right? So I'm just making the self explicit here. And we'll be able to also do stuff like this, right? So self output is 1 underscore, so it translates to that lambda. So just getting everyone aware on what we mean with the underscore. And then we can also do fancy stuff like this, right? Here at the bottom. So Yehuda, then he saw this talk and he realized that we could actually implement this on Rubinius today. So he implemented it, and we want to show it working, right? So before we go into the hardcore part, I just want to show some tooling that Rubinius provides us. So how can I clear this?
Apple.
Clear the whole screen. It's like Apple technology. Okay, so here I have Rubinius checked out my machine, and then I'm calling Rubinius compile and passing -a, you can see there, and that's going to return that stack syntax tree. And we can see here that's basically a script, and what the script is doing is a send, right? And send name foo, the line is 1. We are allowing to call private methods in this case, and the receiver is self itself. Whoa, that's little? Okay. And then we can do stuff like foo equals 1, and we are going to see that now it's not a send anymore, it's a local variable assignment with a local variable access, right? And then if we want to implement our feature, we can look at the tree and try to have an idea of what we want. So imagine that we have this and we get the tree. What we want is that every time we have a send with arguments node, right? We need to check if all the arguments, if any of the arguments in that node is an underscore, and if it's an underscore, we want to change it somehow to generate a lambda, right? And that's what Mr. Yehuda did, and he's going to take over, and I'm going to show the code by his taking over.
Cool. So first of all, the most important thing is if it's already valid Ruby syntax, but you want to change the semantics, it's very easy in Rubinius because Rubinius already provides a transformation pass. So you can transform any code into any other code as long as it's already valid. If it's invalid, then you have to go muck with a parser, which, as Jose pointed out yesterday, is very complicated. So the way a transform works in Rubinius is that you create a new type of AST node, which inherits from the original. In this case, it was sent with arguments, and then you implement a match question mark method. It takes a bunch of stuff like receiver, blah blah blah, and then you basically say like, is this the kind of node that we want? So in this case, if there's no arguments, then we don't want it, and we want to make sure there's at least one argument, and any of the arguments is a send with an underscore in it. And then if so, we return a new copy of this node, and what Rubinius does is instead of inserting a regular send with arguments node, it inserts this special underscore node. So Rubinius will basically call all the transforms. You can see on top we said it's a default transform, that you can namespace your transforms, and then you can decide which ones to apply in different contexts. So for instance, Rubinius has a kernel transform, so certain transforms only apply in Rubinius' own code, so that way they can make things keywords for their own purposes and not have that affect regular Ruby code. Seems good, bro.
Hello? Hello?
Right.
So here you can see that I'm trying to run the code, array.h with underscore, and it's not working. So this code was commented. I'm going to uncomment it, right? And I'm going to build a new Ruby news very fast because I'm running out of time. And it's going to build very fast, like 5 seconds. Go, go. Maybe 10 seconds. I'm out of time, but it's done. And now I'm going to run it again, and it's going to print 1, 2, 3. Yes!
One more thing. Basically, once you implement your node, the other part is you need to implement the bytecode method. So all I'm doing here, if you look at this closely, is you'll see I'm taking a node and I'm making a lambda node out of it. So then I'm saying go run whatever bytecode we're having with the lambda. Yes, we ran out of time, I know.
Scumbag Jose shuts off my timer. All right, next up is Brent, and he is talking about Pry. And tell me when you're ready.
Cool. I'm ready now. That's
All right.
my beautiful face. It's all over
Go.
the internet. Okay. So I'm talking about Pry. That's me on the internet also, everywhere. My username. So I'm talking about Pry, and Pry is a pretty cool debugging tool that I just found out about a couple weeks ago at Ruby Hoedown. So Pry is made by John Mayer, and it's also at pry.github.com. It's a really awesome tool. So you have unit tests, and everything's working perfectly, and you notice everything starts failing, and you don't know why. And so this is what you do, right? Everyone just does put statements, and they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll just see what my variables are at. So puts a bunch of times, no, that's wrong. So, for instance, then I have this gem called Yelp Me, and I want to find out information about a place in San Francisco called Mr. Lou's Win-Win Bar and Grand Sazerac Emporium. Beautiful place. That guy loves it. So I type this in, and shit, everything goes wrong, and I don't know why. So I'm like, what the fuck? My face. And so, Pry to the rescue. So now I'm going to do a demo, and here we go. So
Bigger font.
sorry guys, it's going to be red, no black. Maybe.
There you go.
Better? Alright, cool. So we see that, and then this happens. There. Cool. Alright, so now I'm going to use Pry, and I'm going to check some things out. So, first I'm going to fuck off. Okay, so I required my gem, and so now I'm going to do shit. I'm going to do some shit. Search.
You're missing a comma.
Thank you, sir. Cool, so it broke. So I want to find out why it broke, and there's this beautiful method called cat. Just to show you. That appearing cool? Cool, so I want to do cat x, and it'll give me the hash and deal with the colors. It's awesome. So do it one more time, and then I can see in my gem that I'm doing Yelp base new, and then query search. So I need to edit method, -p to do a patch, and I want to do Yelp base search. So that drops me into this editor of the future called Nano. Cool, so now I need to save it, and this is, shit, this is tricky. Okay, cool. So now I run that method again, and we can see that it spits out San Francisco. Cool, so that's a string. Fuck, I'm doing it wrong. So I need to edit method yelpme.search. Again, editor of the future. So save that, and then boom. Cool. Then there we go. So go to Mr. Lou's and get a drink. It's in the Tenderloin, but I promise it's really safe. Thank you. So there we go.
Awesome, thank you. Up next is Jim, and he is going to talk about KIF and 1 second. Are you ready? All right, you have 5 minutes. Go.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim. I work at Square. I'm going to tell you about a little something called KIF because, well, gosh, you guys all asked. So I work at Square with a lot of other people who are here today, and it's a really awesome place. And here's the story about the engineering team at Square. So we started out, we have some Rubyists. A lot of them came from Pivotal Labs. They think of things like test-driven development as religion and pair programming and all this wonderful stuff. And we've got this iOS team, and all of us came from Apple, and Apple thinks testing is a dirty word, and thinks that QA departments should be in charge of testing, and it's kind of a big mess. So what's going to happen when we put a bunch of Pivotal people and a bunch of Apple people together? Fight! No, it's actually really nice. We all learn from each other, and we decided we needed to do a lot of automated testing in our iOS apps, just like we do a lot of automated testing on the server. So we looked at some of the options out there. So there's this automated testing framework called Frank. And here's a diagram of how it works. And your test scripts run, and your app runs this little Frank server inside of it. They communicate over HTTP. I mean, really? Are you kidding me? An HTTP server to run tests? Okay, so we looked at this other thing. It was called iCube, right? Because all of us love Cucumber. Cucumber's awesome. Cucumber's the way we write acceptance tests, and it's really cool. And so let's look at what iCube does. The HTTP server allows us to see an XML version of the iPhone screen and to emulate tap/swipe/. Are you kidding me? This is an HTTP server and an XML representation? Really? Come on, guys. All right, so here's this other thing called Squish. It runs in Eclipse, which Eclipse is awesome. Even better, not only does it run in Eclipse, it costs $2,400 per person per year to use it. Are you kidding me? There's one more called Phone Monkey, and when you want to edit your test, it's got this nice interface. You can go into your iPhone and call down like a touch on an atomic element view with monkey ID number 0 and arguments of 122 and 131. Are you freaking kidding me? Come on, guys. So here's what we did. We came up with something called KIF. It stands for keep it functional. There's minimal indirection. It's actually Objective-C code running inside your app as your app is running. Runs inside the app as your app's running, right. It sends actual events. There's no emulation of anything. We send touch events through the run loop and just do everything natively. And it actually uses the accessibility frameworks if you're looking for controls on the screen, which is a special bonus because that means you're thinking about accessibility in your apps. And accessibility is something that all of us who can see don't like to think about that often. So here's an example KIF test run. This is the Square card case app that I'm sure all of you used to pay for your food at the food trucks last night at the party. And here we see it's tap some things, log in. It's going to add some cards to your card case. There's Sightglass Coffee. There's Toasty Melts. They were at the party last night. There's Lilybell Flowers. There's going to be a few more it's going to put in. And this is just an automated test that's running through and making sure all of these things end up in your Square card case at the right time. We can go through just a couple more.
How are you typing that fast?
It's like magic, dude. It's a machine. So how does KIF work? KIF works with Objective-C, because how many of you have ever written Objective-C? Show of hands. That's a lot of you. Okay. And Objective-C looks like this, right? It's Objective-C. We like it. At least those of us who are Objective-C programmers like it. And so that's about it. You can write this. It's on GitHub, github.com/square/KIF. That's my Twitter handle if you want to talk to me about it. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.
Wow, amazing. Less than 5 minutes. Huh. Who's up next? Ryan? Ryan, what are you talking about today?
I'm talking about my form engine called Form.
Your form engine called Form.
Yeah.
That's a very creative name.
So, hi, my name's Ryan. I'm new to Rails, and I created a form engine called Forem. So it's F-O-R-E-M. The tagline for the project is Know You. This kind of touch pull request functionality that we have as well. So we say, like, someone asks, we want this feature in Forum, we go, Know You. So it has topics, tests, topics, posts, forums, allows you to hide, lock, pin, etc., etc. And within your application, we go across this pretty little thing here. We open up a little text menu here. Really, the only configuration we've got is that you mount it inside your application, just like this. You can mount it as anything, and yeah, it just works. So if you're looking for a forum engine within a Rails application, use this. because it's really the only thing out there. Or if you don't like my forum engine, then you can build your own, but only after you read chapter 17 of my book. Thank you.
Oh, geez, that was fast. Yeah, he's giving a new meaning to the word lightning talk. All right, next up is Daniel, and what are you talking about today?
General
Front-end comments. Uh-oh. And I'm going to talk about having a blank screen.
That's a big deal.
I don't know what to say about that. I don't know where I'm going. I think I'll awkwardly exit stage now. That will be my lightning talk. Or we can read the sign. Oh, beautiful. I actually read this book once. Actually, I'm lying. I can't do anything on the front end. If you see my website, you know what I'm talking about. Ooh. Ah, X.
56 template.
Hey guys.
It'll be quick.
Say something funny.
You can't have a good lightning talk session without awkward setup issues, right? It's just not lightning talk without it. Ooh. Oh. There we go.
Alright, this will be fast. This is just generally some front-end lessons that I've had, and I think that more of us should be aware of the front-end layer, as Chris was saying. If anything, this should be called 25 ways CSS and HTML punch me in the face. This presentation is more of a conversation. These are open-ended questions. Probably have to do research on your own. This is going to get the conversation going, and this is actually part of a bigger presentation that we'll be doing at Magma Rails. Let's get started. Front-end development gets pretty messy pretty fast. CSS sucks, HTML sucks. It's only getting good now because of HTML5 and SCSS and Compass. Why does it get messy? There's no real standards. No standards in HTML, no standards in CSS, no standards in SCSS, no standards in Compass implementation, no standards in file organization. We're only starting to do that with Rails 3.1. We have no test suites. No agreed upon best practices or tools. These are all problems that are a lot worse if you're working with other front-end developers. If you imagine that was just one person, that was one problem with yourself, imagine trying to bring that other 2 or 3 other 5 other developers trying to work with the front-end layer. It'll get very complicated really fast. This is a big problem. From picture, it ends up basically being cowboy coding. Cowboys get shot. Not a good idea. This free-for-all mentality is pretty dangerous because, well, you already know probably. We need to get consistent. These guys who are shooting the Cowboys, they look pretty consistent. Look at how they're dressed. Let's go back to that. Just take that in for a second. This is kind of how CSS feels. Just soak that in while I get over this nervousness. Cool. Let's start with an easy rule. Alphabetize your CSS attributes. Why? Well, it's really about expectations. Convention over configuration, right? Being able to spec something is key to efficiency. Consistency rule number 2. Consistency between the DOM structure and CSS structure. SVN blog just talked about this. This is a snippet of what they were trying to say. Looks a lot cleaner and you're able to expect something. Maintainability. Another consistency tip. Create a style guide for HTML and CSS structure for the team to look at if they're going to be writing some styles. Ensure the team is aware of this guide and ensure they commit to it. Create your own rules. My number 1 rule, separation of content from presentation. You're probably all aware, we're a land of semantics. This sucks. Why? It's not semantic. This is a lot better, and this is because of Compass and SCSS. These are some mix-ins. It's a lot cleaner. If you don't create these rules, you'll run into problems because it'll look inconsistent. Imagine your Rails controller look like this. No one does that. Why would you do that with CSS? Rails doesn't have this problem because generally we all have a convention to go over. We need to achieve the same thing for the front-end layer. More at Mountain Rails.
Thank you. Okay, this is Gabriel, and Gabriel is talking about Commander, and I heard that Gabriel loves Ruby the tender love way, so I support it. I support its lightning stuff.
Thank you.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, go.
Okay. So I want to do a little talk about Commander, which is a complete solution for Ruby command line executables, but also have a little love note to open source. Just a note, not a whole letter, because I've only got 5 minutes, so I can't get too graphic. This is me, and that's my Twitter. So, Commander is a gem. You can install it like this. You can find it on GitHub there. And it allows you to put together simple little command line apps with a little bit of a nicer DSL kind of syntax. Does a lot of stuff for you. Does all kinds of crazy things if you want to, like interface with voice recognition and speech synthesis if you want to have a command line app that actually talks to you. Maybe you do. And also allows you to do interesting things like validate user input by just saying like ask for array or ask for string or ask for date. And know that you're going to get that type of object back or have user's input parsed that way. So it's pretty handy. So I can't really take too much credit for this. I discovered this gem earlier this year, and I ran into this situation that probably a lot of you have seen, where you wonder, is this project being maintained anymore? Has it been abandoned? You you look in the GitHub issues, and you have someone saying, I'm sorry, I'm not really using Ruby anymore, I'm not going to maintain this. Sorry. But thanks to GitHub, it's a lot easier now for you to just, if you come across something like this, just go ahead and try to take it over. To see, I just contacted the guy and was like, hey, I want to fix this issue on Ruby 1.9 with your gem, but I guess you're not maintaining it anymore. Would you be open to me kind of taking it over and maintaining it? And he's like, yes, please do. Great. So I am now maintaining this gem, and I've actually gotten a couple of contributors who have patched stuff, made it load a lot faster on Ruby 1.9, which is great, and added features. So that's kind of a success story for GitHub there. So please take a look at it and send me pull requests. Thanks a lot.
I was hoping to see a demo. Man, next time. Yeah. Okay, what is your name? Noah. Nice to meet you, Noah. I'm Aaron. And are you ready?
I am ready.
And go.
So I work with Yala. The New York salespeople have been told not to call us YouTube people with yachts. But if you have a bunch of videos you'd like to make money on, we are the people you would bring them to. You sign up for an account with us. A number of large companies do, including ESPN. Anytime you see an ESPN sports video playing, we're the ones serving that up. We also collect analytics on it, which means that at any given time that you're watching, it's going to send about a lot back about where you are in it, what bit rate you're watching it at, a lot of numbers. We collect them all and we save them all. And that's our little internal app for viewing that. So if you're wondering what the graphs and stuff look like, lower right corner.
Into the mic, please.
Sorry. So we get all of these pings, is what we call them, about how the playbacks are going. We have a lot of web servers that turn those into big log files. And then we have a set of Ruby MapReduce jobs. First, to copy all that off, recompress it as LZO, so we can do great big splittable Ruby MapReduces on it. So MapReduce is not usually done in Ruby. We've got a little framework on top of Hadoop. If you've seen something called Wukong, it's a very similar syntax, and that's better. But you can see down there you declare a mapper class and you declare methods on it. It's fairly straightforward with streaming MapReduce to put together something like this, packages it up, sends it across, and you can do all of your MapReduces in Ruby from there on. We do that at production scale, and I mean, we're handling ESPN. It scales pretty well. All right, the main reason it scales pretty well is because the main bottleneck on something like this is I/O. It's just shipping that many numbers around, and Ruby's not amazing for CPU efficiency, but in this case you don't much care about CPU efficiency. You do have to do all that bundling to get it to run through streaming MapReduce. Okay, we store all of that primarily in Cassandra. Cassandra is a really good way to find a 4-byte needle in a 7 terabyte haystack in a very small number of milliseconds. There turns out to be great Ruby tools around it. Highly recommend the Twitter Cassandra gem for Ruby. We have a set of APIs on top of that, partly because we started before that was really usable. And we display it all in a Rails app, so the graphs you saw were in Rails. Oh, and we also do it to MySQL. We're trying to fix that. Right, to be able to query it, we have an additional set of Sinatra apps in front of it. That's important for metering, throttling, things like that. Again, a layer of Ruby tends to make the non-Ruby solutions that you use for the back-end data stores a lot more usable, a lot like Rails and MySQL, really. We have a bunch of other MapReduces that we handle in pretty much exactly the same way. So, again, all of this is done in Ruby with MapReduce. So, I guess the main takeaway here is the whole Rails doesn't scale thing. If anybody starts to turn around and tell you Ruby doesn't scale for the big data stuff, it can absolutely be done at scale. These are, again, different sources of data, different kinds of MapReduces, some of them fairly CPU intensive. At some point, we'll probably get around to calling out to other languages from Ruby for reasons of CPU efficiency. We haven't mostly even had to do that yet. The other major thing that we do with big data and Ruby is real-time, because everything I've described is great for big batch jobs and falls over terribly if you need low latency, and we use a Ruby product called Logstash. It's JRuby, it's simple. If you're looking for something real-time for aggregating log data or anything like it, highly recommended. And we're generating 33,000 events per second and feeding that into Logstash without any particular problems. We've written some additional plugins to meter that as it goes through. Basically the backend there is Elasticsearch, but again, we use Ruby tooling for those interfaces. Yeah, so that's a good quick summary of what we're doing. Anybody got any questions?
You have.
What's your Twitter name?
So my Twitter name is AngelBob, ANGELBOB. I almost never use it, but feel free to ask. You can also find me as GitHub, on GitHub as Noah Gibbs, NOAHGIBBS, and that's a much easier way to get hold of me.
All right, thank you, Noah. All right, up next we got Tim. You ready?
Yeah, 1 second. Josh said I don't speak for Gogaruko. He wanted that clear. So now you can start my time.
Tim doesn't speak for Gogaruko, and go.
You're all a bunch of racist, sexist, homophobic bigots. So am I, and I'm a like queer, feminist theory spewing sort of person, so I should be past that. It turns out there's a whole bunch of studies involving sub-second response times and other somatic involuntary responses that indicate we have a bunch of biases we don't like to admit. And if you're not aware of that and you argue with people and they try to point this out, you cannot actively counter it. So you need to make steps to actively counter it. You can do like the Sarahs and contribute Railsbridge, which has done huge amounts for getting women more involved with Ruby. Or you could sit there and argue with people about why women aren't applying to your jobs, and it couldn't be anything to do with you. I haven't had that hard of a time hiring women, oddly enough. I don't know why. We're getting our clock cleaned by the enterprise in this field. And when a bunch of suits from IBM are more inclusive than you might want to look at your community and consider something wrong. I hate to break it to you, we're not the picked-upon geeks anymore. We're the power elite in a society where in the middle of a recession, all of us have too many jobs and money. We're the jocks now picking on kids and wondering why people tell us you should stop picking on them. Sorry, our society is a bunch of 13-year-olds running around the locker room snapping each other in the cock with their towels. And you wonder, women aren't applying to these jobs? Why wouldn't they? Jeez. Not every woman should have to hang with the scros. Nothing wrong with that, but you shouldn't have to masculinize every woman for her to get a job in the field. So fuck you if you have a problem with that. You don't get to decide who has a problem with it. Randall Thomas, one of the few other black guys that comes to Rails conferences, he came to my wedding in the middle of Texas, which involved a 2-hour drive in the middle of the night with his white girlfriend across Texas. He said he didn't like that. I argued with him for a little bit. And then I realized I don't get to say. I've never been black, much less black in the middle of Texas. You white straight males, and even me, I'm a little queer but I pass, we don't get to decide what makes people uncomfortable. Sorry, that's not how it works. A kid, when I went back to Utah, my brother-in-law told me a kid got jumped coming out of a gay club, put in intensive care, and curbed. That's not anything you ever had to worry about, so you don't get to decide where an uncomfortable boundary is for people. I personally have never had a problem. It's been a pretty welcoming, inclusive community. But on the other hand, I'm a large male who will feed you your teeth if you give me trouble. So, no one should have to take that line. Take active steps to make your community more inclusive. That means in your job listing, say, women and minorities welcomed, including racial minorities, sexual minorities, the disabled. We're horrible about this sort of thing. I mean, I know you all want to hire women, and you're wondering why they're not applying and saying, oh, why aren't chicks applying to our jobs, man? Sorry, that's why.
And your name?
Stephen Gordon.
Stephen, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And
So
I
first of all,
approve.
thanks. First of all, I do owe this a little bit to Nick Quaranto. He mentioned that he was on the T in Boston, sitting next to 2 other guys talking about Ruby. And I think Nick knows a little bit about Ruby. And the weird thing is he couldn't strike up a conversation with them. So it definitely goes to show that there's something going on in our community that we really don't know how to interface with one another, even when we're sitting with one another. So think about it. Yeah, no one's on the stairs here, so that's good. But what I do really want to talk to you today about is that I'm trying to adopt this thing called Rails 3.1, and it's doing some really weird things. By the way, my name is Stephen, also known as @SGHarms. So that's going away. So anyway, so I love this like scaffold thing. I think a lot of people came to Rails because of scaffolding, and I still think it rocks. I saw the Usenet post where I say, you know, you broke scaffolding and you suck, and I think David Hansen called me an idiot. So okay. I'll live. But here's my question, is that the scaffold generates code that looks like this, and it doesn't work. And I was trying to show this to someone at RailsBridge about how awesome Rails was and how easy it makes Ajax stuff, and it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work. And then I met this awesome guy named Ryan Bigg, who's seated right there, and he explained to me that all you have to do is pass this application JSON thing, and it'll work. And I just think that's garbage, personally. Because, oh my gosh, look, it's working now. Why do I have to specify my content type to make Rails 3.1 work? I'm glad someone's clapping because that gives me hope that somebody actually might know the answer. Because I've asked about 9 of you so far, and no one knows. Although there's a guy in a lab coat that I think has a good shot at knowing the answer. So.
I know nothing about Rails.
Okay, well, I still have some time left, so I was going to say 2 more things. I met this awesome guy named Steve Klavnik at Lone Star RubyConf. And we were kind of talking about how people get burnt out in the Ruby community. I don't want to talk about that, because I know people get burnt out, but what I do think is that we have a legacy fixation on certain community members, both amongst the positive variety, like a certain individual who just suddenly disappeared, and I think we also have a fixation on people who've impacted our community in a different way, like Zed. Now, here's the funny thing, I've never met Zed Shaw, but I've sure heard a whole fuck lot about him. Move on. Zed's moving on. He said he's moved on. We need to move on too. Let's not fixate on personalities. Let's fixate on what we can do as a community and how to move forward. And I'd also say I love RailsBridge, and I love all you guys, and I'm glad you're all here. And I love you all in the tender love way.
Jose, why isn't that fixed? Come on. All right. What is your name? David. Hi, I'm Aaron. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the lightning talk section of the program. are you ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, go.
Oh. Okay, there you go. So, hi, my name is David Padilla. I work for a company called Crowd Interactive, which is a Rails development company, and I'm here to remind you that open source software is free. You actually knew that open source software is free. You can just take someone else's code and just put a little bit of your own code and then make a profit out of it, right? You can make some money. And judging from the jobs board out there, a lot of money, right? So anyway, so I wanted to share with you guys a little experiment that we're running at Crowd Interactive, which is we launched a beta of a website called shoerevolt.com. And this is a website that we built for a nonprofit for free. We gave away 200 hours of development or so to this nonprofit organization. We didn't bill a penny for it, right? So how did we achieve that? What we did is, we're constantly training people because we gave up on hiring a while ago. Hiring is so hard. There's no Rails developers right now, right? So it's better to train them. And what we do is that we bring new people, and instead of having them rebuild, reinvent a blog or a bookstore or whatever, we give them these real-life projects. And then our senior developers lead them through training, Rails, TDD, all of that stuff. But it's a real project. It's not, some tutorial from some book, right? So in the end, we end up with a couple of trained developers, and we help someone, right? Which I think it's a good thing. So I just wanted to remind you that you're making money out of something that you got for free. So it's fair that you give away a little something now and then, okay? So I'm going to drop a commercial here. We're organizing Magma Rails in October down in Mexico, which is used to train even more people in Rails, right? Right now we're looking for a few more sponsors. If you're interested, please shoot us an email or look for the guys in the luchador masks around and ask them. And thank you. That's it. Yes. I just want to thank you for my time.
Thank you, Magma Red. Sweet. I always wanted to go to Mexico. Whoa. That is awesome. Hello? Good, how are you? Blake? Yeah, talk right into that. And actually use that one.
This one right here? Okay, hi, I'm Blake.
You can take it out too if you want to.
Yeah, I'm mostly doing a demo, so I've got like 3 slides for you. That's me, and this is what I'm going to talk about, get spaces. Basically, this solves a problem for me, which is we work with a lot of feature branches at the company I work at, and I found that I want to kind of work on them for a while, merge them incrementally back into master as I'm working on them. But what happens is someone will come over to my desk and say, oh, we need to change this real quick. So I want to just jump in there and change it. So what I wanted to do is keep multiple working directories for me to kind of just switch into and do stuff. I know a lot of you guys might say stash kind of served this purpose, and for you it might. For me, this kind of worked out good, so I just want to show it to everybody. It is up on GitHub. Can you see that all right? Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is create a new Rails project. Do what?
The guys at the top can't see the top of the screen.
Okay.
Hit enter a couple times.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so did I create it? No. So Rails, new, demo. So now I have a typical Rails project I'm going to switch into. And I'm going to set that up real quick into Git. I'm using Git Extras, which will kind of automate a few things for me. So now I have a Git repo. You can take a look at the status on that. Nothing to commit. Take a look at the log. I've got initial commit. But so I want to introduce a secondary working directory. So in this case, I'm going to say git spaces. And now I have a master directory. So I can move into there. And I can see this, do my git log. And and hop back up out of here. And if I want a new space, I can just say get spaces, create. I'm not actually really happy with the way I have the command set up. I actually wrote this last week in the evening. So I'm just going to refactor registration, which is something I'm working on right now, and I can switch into there. What it will do is it sets you up on master. It's kind of, I didn't want to get in your way. Some more of the stuff could be automated, could maybe give you a new branch or something like that. That would be cool. But for right now, you would just kind of create your own thing. And we'll touch something. What did I do here? I'm sorry, I'm used to doing my screen. I'm trying not to do that. Can you guys see on the bottom of the screen too, right? Okay, cool. So, did I touch it? Yes. We'll add that to the repo. And we have a new commit. So at this point, I would actually leave this around for a little bit. Someone can, I'm working on something else, someone comes over to my desk, I can just switch into it. When I'm all done, I can just remove it. Sorry. Switch into my master. And then just to show that we're actually checking, I could be working on stuff here, but I can now check out that branch. Yeah, and there it is. So that's it. That's the tool. I might have some time for questions. I don't know, but
yeah, you have a minute and 30 seconds.
Okay, cool. Well, that's the end of my talk. I actually work at Doximity. We're hiring like everyone else, and anybody have any questions? You in the back?
Why not just git clone and change the name directory?
That might work. I'll give that a shot.
The question is, why not just git clone?
Yeah, then you have to push to 2 different repositories rather than just kind of saving it in your, if you're cool with that, that's fine. For my workflow, I just kind of wanted to introduce a second working directory and have everything work that way. Gives you secondary stashes and stuff like that too. Up there? Yeah. Actually, everything else works exactly the same. So you have as many remotes as you want. You can push to any of them. It's really nice for that. Merges work exactly the same way. And actually, right now it sets you up with a master. But after using this for a week, I think it's actually good not to even have a master. If you create a new space, it'll pop you into master, and then you can instantly branch off of that, start working. When you're done with it, just kind of push it, and it's gone. But you'll be able to recreate that space later.
10 seconds.
That's it for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hold on. There we go. I haven't had the alarm go off yet, so I wanted to wait for that. Xavier, are you ready for this?
This way?
No. Use that one. Yeah, you can take it out. Okay. Are you ready to go?
Yes, I'm
All
ready.
right, go.
Hi, my name's Adrian. I'm from Australia. I moved here a month ago, so I'm looking for friends. Please come up and talk to me.
I'll be your friend.
Yes. I've been using Ruby for ages. Recently, I did some work speeding up the require and load time. If you're using 192, you should definitely look at patching it. So I did that a while back. These days, I'm at Square, which is awesome. I get to be this guy and make really cool shit for the fraud guys to fight crime with. Probably the best job ever. Anyway, today I'm going to tell you a story, which started with me reading this book. You should read this book. It's excellent. It has Java in it, but it's fine. It's really okay. It talks about testing a lot, obviously by the name. So unit tests, integration tests, acceptance specs, how to do mocking and stubbing. And anyway, as with most programming books, I sort of came out of it not having a lot of faith in my own abilities. But it got really thinking about a lot of the sort of mocking and stubbing ideas. There was a lot of literature comes from Java, right? These guys with JMock and whatever, they sort of wrote all the first papers and introduced it. And I was thinking, well, what have we lost in translation to Ruby? And the obvious one is, well, we don't have a compiler, we don't have interfaces, and so you can stub a method, and you don't even have to implement it or anything. and you can have all green specs. And this has bitten me a few times. So I was like, oh man, I can totally fix this problem. We can have like interfaces in Ruby, and it'd be awesome. And I looked on GitHub, and people have already done interfaces with Ruby and whatever. And I was getting kind of excited about, hey, we can have like contracts in Ruby and blah, 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 blah. And anyway, it turned out I was making Java in Ruby. So that kind of, after a while, I thought that sucked a bit. So I went back to the drawing board and thought, okay, I don't want to write any more code. Surely we already have some code around that we can use to get some extra sort of assertions around our specs. And I thought for a while, and it turns out we actually do. We've got these methods, right, which we already have, we've already written them. And I thought, well, surely we can hook into these and, run some extra tests. We can say, well, if I'm trying to stub something out and it doesn't exist, that's broken. So I looked around a bit, and it turns out Mocha already has an option to do this. You can just set this and then it'll raise an exception if you try and stub something that doesn't exist. But of course the problem is, we've got this guy telling us we have to isolate our tests, and we don't want to have to bring in all of our dependencies just to test a unit, right? So I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. So I thought we actually kind of want sort of more of a conditional thing. Like sometimes we want to check these, sometimes we want to check the should receive, and sometimes we just want to leave the hell alone. So I wrote a gem called aspect fire, which makes you awesome. And I'm going to quickly show it off. So here's a spec. It should look fairly familiar. I've just included aspect fire at the top, and the only thing I've changed is this fire double thing there. And I say the type of the class that I'm doubling, right? And then I set expectations. So, I don't know why everyone's laughing, and it makes me uncomfortable.
Come on, bro.
Okay, they ran the spec. That's great. The thing is, I haven't actually written the attendee class yet. I've just put it in there with no implementation. If I run rspec and load up attendee, it's the same spec, but it throws an exception telling me that I've broken shit.
Is this Comic Sans? This font, what is this?
It's Monofer. It's got drop numerals and shit.
It's beautiful.
Or that you should use Monofer for your coding. Thank you very much.
Someone should do a lightning talk about fonts. Where's Shane? No, you're not. Hi, I'm Aaron.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Nice to meet you, Brian. What are you going to talk to us about today?
Use the microphone. The other
That one. You know what? I'm going to take this one away. This is why the lab coat has many pockets. And let me tell you, it's very convenient. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, go.
Hi, I'm Brian Jenkins, and this is my lightning talk, and this is my lightning slide. I wrote it during lunch. I am writing a business SaaS software for art galleries with my wife Amy. It's called Gallery Star, and we developed our app as a single-tenant app, and they were like, "Oh, we got to sell this thing." Okay, so we're going to need to be able to sell this to more than one person, hopefully. And to do that, we're going to need to separate the data for one customer from another customer's data so they don't see each other's stuff, because that doesn't build faith in your thing. So we were looking at how to do that, and the solutions that I saw, this is a Rails app, it's backed by Postgres, and we were looking at, there was like put a account ID in every table everywhere in your entire database, and then make sure that your queries that you're issuing are, filtering out stuff for everybody except for the person, and of course you'll have indexes on all those things, and so all your indexes will have to start with, account ID, and how do you then make sure that that's applied everywhere? Set up like default scopes for all your models, and it kind of looked pervasive and a little scary, because the stakes are really high. If you screw this up, like, people are going to see other people's stuff and they're going to or they're going to know that their stuff is leaking into other people's screens. And I came across this solution that I want to share with you because it made me really happy. And so it's Postgres can do multiple schema per database. And so you can set up basically like a search path. So you just tell Postgres, I want you to look in this schema first, and if you don't find the table I'm talking about, look in this schema, and then look in this schema. It's just like a search path like you have for commands. And so what you do is when you create a new account, you create a schema for that account, and you give it maybe the ID of the account table. And then when people come in with a request and they're authenticated for that account, you set the search path for that connection. And then what happens is they find their private tables for your version of for their version of your app before they find the underlying tables. And so what you have to do in order to make this work, so the thing that's nice about it is that you've got your logic about isolating everybody out in one place. It's like an application controller. Get applied there. And then the rest of the application, you can completely ignore this problem because you just develop it as if it were a single tenant app. The price is that it makes your migrations a little bit more complicated because you have to migrate everybody's schema separately. So what you do is when a request comes in, you figure out which account the person is for, you set the path. When somebody signs up a new account, they're like, oh, I want to use your thing. You, as part of creating the account object, you are running schema RB to create their schema. And then what you do is you delete any shared tables from the private schema so that when people come in via the path, they'll fall through. So you do that for like your sessions table, your users table, your accounts table, stuff that's like system-wide and not specific to the account, to the tenant. And then whenever you do a migration, you have to run those migrations first for the underlying sort of public shared schema, and then for each of the private schema. So that's probably the scariest part of it, because if you do something awful, maybe like some of them get migrated and some of them don't, it'd have to be pretty awful. But that's the most scary part of this. The rest of this is like, you're pretty sure that stuff is not going to get mixed between your customers, because you've taken it out of the application and out of the logic and pushed it down to the database level. So that's what I want you to do. All right. So I discovered this idea on the internet. There's two sources that I want to give shout outs to. One is a talk that Guy Naor did at, I don't remember which conference, a while ago. He actually talks about
20 seconds.
Different strategies for doing this, and the last one he talks about is this schema thing. The other thing is a recent blog post by this guy, Jared Santos, where he goes into the details of how to do this. There isn't really like a drop-in gem sort of solution yet, but I'm sure you can hack it together. Thanks.
I just want everyone to know that I follow Ben's style here of using Papyrus in my terminal. So I recommend that to all of you. Look up Papyrus in your terminal font. It's the best one for programming. For sure.
That's real.
Hi, I'm Aaron.
Hi, Alex.
Alex, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Are you ready for your lightning talk?
I guess I better be.
All right, and go.
Okay, so I'm here to scold you all, but hopefully insert a new paradigm. No, sorry, not a paradigm, just a metaphor for different ways that we can program. What I've noticed is there's essentially two ways of programming, and one of them is the monkey style, and one of them is the robot style. So the talk, this is the scolding part of the talk. You are not an object-oriented programmer. Maybe you are sometimes, but most of the time you're actually not. You're trying to solve problems monkey style, which means that you are reaching into objects, pulling stuff out of the objects, manipulating them. You're basically inventing algorithms, right? Now this is, even though you're doing this in an object-oriented language, you're not necessarily being object-oriented when you're doing this. This is called the functional style of programming, or the procedural style of programming, and it's a basic problem-solving technique. It's probably how and why we all got into programming in the first place, which is because we like solving problems. We like going from point A to point Z and traversing all the points in between. Object-oriented programming, invented by Alan Kay, was sort of a revolution. It's a completely different way of solving problems. It's the tell, don't ask style, where you tell an object what you want, ask it to do it for you, and you keep your hands off. And as we all know, as monkeys, this is very hard for us to keep our hands off of things. It's a lot easier to use once it's all done. I mean, everybody who's used a good API knows how great it is to use a good API, but creating that API took a lot of work, and a lot of us, when we first solve the problems, we're not putting in that work. So in short, procedural code versus object-oriented code, they're fundamentally different thinking and problem-solving styles. And I just want to let you all know, as a room full of Rubyists, it's okay not to be object-oriented. I mean, it's all about diversity, right, Tim? We want to be inclusive of our Perl-based heritage and of sort of all of the ancestral primate problem-solving skills that we come pre-programmed with. But you should really know what you're missing. In particular, if you aren't using actual object-oriented techniques, you may or may not be getting these advantages: encapsulation, modularity, testability, polymorphism in the right way rather than the wrong way, which is the switch statement. So you may not be getting the advantages that you think you're getting by using an object-oriented language, because you're not thinking of problems in an object-oriented way. So as a few examples of these, things that we all use every day as Rails programmers or Ruby programmers that are not objects. Templates are not objects. Even Haml templates, not objects. They're templates. They're a way to render text onto an output stream. They don't actually provide good encapsulation in most cases. Even though Haml is concise, it's not an object. Regular expressions, totally not objects. Closures, they're really cool, but they're not objects. They don't give you all of the benefits of encapsulation in particular because they have to inherit scope. Switch statements, especially respond to, which I think has been replaced with respond with, which is much better. And I'm a little bit on the fence about whether modules or the presenter pattern counts as object-oriented in the sort of monkey versus robot style. So we can talk about that later if you're not completely annoyed with me telling you that you're not an object-oriented programmer. Okay, we've seen these. I'm going to skip a little bit by tell, don't ask, only play with your friends. And Demeter, you've all heard of Demeter. She was really not that bad a goddess. She was picked on a lot. I'm not going to talk to you about what Poseidon did with her after he turned into a horse. And anyway, here I'm going to now give you some rules of thumb for how to kind of look at your code and decide whether it is or is not object-oriented, and then you can decide where to go from there. In general, if you are if you're using an object from inside of a method, that object should have either been passed to, created by, or otherwise provided inside of that object, right? An instance variable is a fine place to get an object. One way that this turns into sort of a Zen refactoring, if you sort of take your glasses off and look at the screen, if all of your dots are near the left margin, then you're probably okay, right? You want to say dog.speak rather than puts dog.thing to say.
30 seconds.
30 seconds, oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to show you an example of refactoring I just did last week in preparing my vanity site. This is alexchafee.com. And as you notice, I'm very excited looking up at the top right corner at my Iconistan. So in order to refactor Iconistan, first I'm using Erector, which is an object-oriented view framework, and I wrote a method that renders all of the objects inside of Iconistan, and the first version of that looked pretty gnarly and functional, but by the end, I extracted a site, and then I was there.
It's done.
Thank you.
Mad science, tender love is harsh, but mad science, tender love is fair. All right, are you ready? Okay, go, 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm here to talk about identity management with Omnioth and Billfold. I work at Zendesk. My name is James A. Rosen. That's an A. If you leave off the A, you get a Fox News reporter. Ken, would you raise your hand? We have a bunch of swag. We're a sponsor. If you want anything, come see Ken. He'll hook you up. This is what your users want. Your users want to come to the site and say, sign in with Twitter, sign in with Facebook, whatever they want. Great, you say. I'll make user have many identities. Are you done? You're not done. Enter Billfold. Billfold lets you manage your identities. It lets your users manage 4 basic use cases. First is sign up. The user doesn't exist and the identity doesn't exist. They click Twitter, it's a new ID. Billfold creates a user, creates an identity, and signs them in. Sign in. The user doesn't exist in the session. The identity does exist in the database. They sign in. The user gets put into the session. Add a new identity. The user already exists. The user signed in. They just want to add an extra way of logging in. They want to merge in their Twitter profile and they originally signed in with Facebook. They click sign in with Twitter and it gets added to their identity. The identity, the Twitter identity gets added to their user profile and they stay signed in. And the last is merging users. So you signed in with Twitter and then you signed out and then you come back to the site and you sign in and you think, what did I sign in with? I know I use Facebook a lot. You sign in with Facebook, your profile isn't there. You need to merge those. You say, sign in with Twitter, and it merges those 2 identities. It's really young. It's a baby little kitten. It's just 1.0, maybe 1.01. I think there was a bug fix. So I would really appreciate anybody using it and giving me feedback. I built it for Rails 3.1 as an engine, but I tried to keep everything as abstract and modularized as possible. So if you want to use it with something else, try it and let me know. If there's something that you need me to extract, I'll happily do so. I think I have plenty of time, so I'm going to give a bonus PSA, which is not in my slide deck, unfortunately. Oh, there it is, bonus PSA. Don't do this. Not all of your users have 2 names. Most of you were clapping, so you understood this. Some of you who weren't don't know anyone from China or South America where the names are backwards, or have 4 of them, or anywhere else in the world, or share. Don't do that.
Or Madonna. Hello. I'm Aaron. Andy, nice to meet you. Andy, are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay, and go. You have 5 minutes.
All right, how many of you guys know what Y Day is? Awesome. Most of you. Okay, cool. So a quick rundown. Y Day, Y the Lucky Sith was in the Ruby community. He did lots of awesome things. He disappeared on August 19th, 3 years ago now? 2 years ago? I don't remember. I'm not a big fan of the fact that we celebrated on the day that he disappeared, but I like the idea. And basically the idea is you take one day and you make something really weird, really cool, something related to teaching, something like that, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my Y Day project, which has a little bit of sort of all of those things. It's called Cubbyhole, and it's designed to kind of help ease the transition between a very basic Sinatra app and something that can actually store stuff. Anyway, I'll give a demo. Called Cubbyhole, the repo. So we have a really basic Sinatra app, right? This might be somewhere you'd start. You have a class, you say, let's get this started. You see it, it works. We can change this, maybe do template, has something dynamic in it maybe, pull something from somewhere else. It's a little bit more interesting. We're still not storing stuff. So at this point, if you were giving a class, you might go down the path of how do you set up active record, how do you set up data mapper or something like that. But those all are really big, really complicated. Even if it's something simple like Redis or you have something simple, there's always configuration. And so my idea was that if there was something that was 0 configuration, you could just include it and then start storing stuff in between requests. That would be cool. So this is what it looks like. Fire Cubbyhole. index. Posts. So, hopefully, I didn't screw it up. Okay, so we have an app now. Basic blog, right? Get a new post. Save it. Something else. So basically, you can just save stuff between requests. So there's no models, no configuration. It's all in memory. It's a total hack. Every object or every class exists, and every class has every method defined on it. You can just call it whatever you want. It implements basic CRUD, and it's should never be used for anything other than this. But I thought it was kind of cool. So that's basically it.
Done? All right. Okay. So I'm here in San Francisco. I'm not from San Francisco. I'm from Seattle, and I was Seattle. Yeah. I was really hoping to meet the hipster hacker here because I know that he lives in San Francisco, and I thought I met him, and he said, "Nope, it's Chuck Testa." Anyway, so I gave a talk last year, and I put up a bunch of pictures of myself in a bikini. And so, yeah. After that, we decided to have a beautiful Rubyist pageant. And so, unfortunately, I didn't win this competition. A good friend of mine that goes way, 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 way back won this competition, and I would like to introduce her today to you. It is Miss Ruby on Rails. So please welcome her, Miss Ruby on Rails, everybody.
Thank you. So thanks, Canada, for hosting this. Let's just start with a little realness. You're a bunch of racist, homophobic, misogynistic bigots. I just want to give another round of applause to Tim Connor, and also to the Ruby community. We're moving, and that's awesome, and it's great that these conversations are happening, so let's, be the industry we want to work in. So yeah, who am I? So this talk is titled Cowboys versus Drag Queens, Learning to be an Effective Member of the Agile Team. Who? Well, I'm Miss Ruby on Rails, and I've been on Rails since 1978, when Josh Susser, Tender Love, Ada Lovelace, Mats and Kent Beck and I were hanging out at Studio 54. We got this crazy idea for a new framework, and well, the rest is history. So cowboys. What are cowboys? Now, cowboys are the unsung American heroes. They get a bad rap around this place, but, the quiet man who gets things done, he runs off, and, I have respect for cowboys. Cowboys get her done, so you gotta respect the cowboys. Drag queens. Now, drag queens are performers. Drag queens are performers. Drag queens, they make it happen. They live, and they live big. So what can we learn from both of these archetypes for functioning as members of a team? What do you need for a team? You need people. People. What do people need to be on a team? Communication. Cowboys don't have much communication. This is what they see. Sometimes they'll get to the chuck wagon. There might be 2 or 3 of them off on a long, long journey. I don't think they talk very much, and when they do, well, who was it earlier that said cowboys get shot? Now, drag queens collaborate. It takes communication to pull something off. Do you see that consistency? Do you see that? So what does it take? It takes people. It takes communication. Where's the dark side of communication? And where's the dark side of drag queens? Divas. Beyonce knows how to communicate. She doesn't have any friends anymore. So we need to, have communication skills, but more follow in the line of the drag family. I give you the House of LaBeija with the legendary mother Pepper LaBeija. Look at that. That's a communicative family. What does it take to keep a family together? Communication. It takes realness. It takes calling the hard things out. This is what retrospectives are great for. You get together, you talk with your team. This is what occasions like this are for. Tim Connor calling everything out, hey, there's still, I think, 16 women this year? That's great. Railsbridge is doing a great job reaching out to women, other minorities, so it's great that this is happening. It takes this kind of frank communication to hold the community together and keep a family going. So in that way, I think we can learn a lot from the family. And at this point, I gotta call out the legendary mother, Ada Lovelace, House of Lovelace. Just give her up. I've learned everything. She was there in Studio 54. Tender Love is my sister in the House of Lovelace, and I'm glad we have the same mother together. So it's about the family and communication, keeping it together. So communication, people. We need people. Hopefully, if we have communication, our team can look like this. Don't they look happy? Look at how inclusive they are. People. Or if we're really lucky, so cowboys get things done, I respect the cowboy. I respect the cowboy running off on his weekend coding binge, reworking the architecture, rewriting that web service in Scala because next week it's going to have a major performance problem, hopefully. So, but the cowboy doesn't function on the team and communication and keeping it together. Pepper LaBeija, she had communication, and so she had a team. A team of people. If you're lucky, your team of people will look like this, and if you're really lucky, it'll look like that. Thank you.
So I assume that all of these happy people are eating salad? Yes, I'm happy when I'm eating salads. That is the end of our lightning talk session. Thank you all for attending. I think it was great. I'm very happy with lightning talks this year. Thank you, Miss Ruby on Rails. Thank you, all of you. I think we have a 15-minute break up next. So